Hello, everyone. Oh, I don't need that headset on. Ha, wrong headset. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a custom campaign in real time. I'm RJ Kerr, your host as always, and we are today going to be working on the continuation of our Sea Shanty Siren complex social encounter. Hoping to get that wrapped up today, theoretically, and so we'll see what we can get done with that. But if you're joining us for the very first time, or you're watching this recap and haven't seen any of the other previous episodes, let me go ahead and get you up to speed so that you're not lost. So, as I said, we are creating a custom campaign in real time with its own unique domain of dread. And we're doing this so that you can see all the thought processes, all the ideas, all the questions and answers and sorts of things that go into creating a full blown campaign using my method. We're using the story circle structure as the general structure for our campaign and filling that in as we go. And we've already done quite a bit on this. We have figured out how our characters arrive in our domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the Blood Moon. We have talked about what kind of motivations would draw characters through this of their own free will. We have figured out where the characters land in a shanty town that we're calling Darkport on the edge of an inland sea, and we've figured out that this inland sea is a big part of our domain of dread, and it was once the basin of a thriving civilization, which has now fallen to ruin and become flooded. We've also figured out that this domain of dread houses an elemental evil called Ovander, that is effectively the dread lord of this domain. We have figured out what our first adventure is going to be, where the characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captivity. And in doing so, discover the existence of a long lost artifact that gives the wielder some power over this domain of dread. And they realize this artifact is their best way out of getting out of here alive. So now we're working on a part of the adventure where the characters are getting proactive, where they're out on their own again. They've got their equipment, they've got their skills, and now they can go and explore the world and find clues seeking this artifact. Uh, this gives our players a ton of agency, and it lets them go pretty much wherever in the world they want to go. But it also gives us a little bit of structure. We're using a node structure for this, which means that we're littering the world with clues, and each of those clues leads to a node or an investigative scene, a place to find additional clues that lead to other nodes or investigative scenes. And so this allows us to kind of build out some discrete components of this that are important in the adventure without having to define the entirety of the world, and without having to kind of make things up on the fly as our characters go out and look for these clues. So, we've done a couple of these already. We've done a 5-room dungeon one, we've done a heist version one, and now we are working on our third one, and this is our, like I said, our complex social encounter, our sea shanty siren encounter, as we're calling it. And let me go ahead and share my screen so we can begin talking about that. So, yeah, before I jump into this, one reminder, this is an interactive stream, so please feel free to jump in the chat with thoughts, opinions, ideas, considerations, concerns, questions, or anything else you want to talk about. Love hearing from you guys. You've come up with some incredible ideas for this specific section already and for our campaign as a whole. Looks like we've already got one comment in the chat from Ben Elder. Evening all. Good to see you, Ben. Glad you made it. Always fun to have you here. All right, so we're, as I said, working on this Sea Shanty Siren adventure, and we know that we need to work a couple clues into this encounter for the players to potentially uncover. And we don't want to make it automatic that they uncover all of these clues, but we know that we want to have these clues littered in there. We did some brainstorming. We decided that our siren is a predatory creature by nature. She lures beings to her atoll and feasts on them. However, recently she's developed a problem of another kind that she needs the character's help with. And the siren needs the characters to steal someone's voice, and she has special requirements for this voice. So she's laid out several options for them to follow. And so we're doing this again as a complex social encounter as opposed to like a 5-room dungeon, although you could certainly do a 5-room dungeon kind of methodology for this if you kind of expand your understanding for it. It's a very flexible system, but we're going in a different direction. And so we've been focusing in on the role play elements of this and defining the characters who are involved in this pretty thoroughly. So as DMs, we can role play a lot of scenarios with them on the fly with minimal amounts of information. And so we started by defining our siren and her personality. And so we came up with an objective for her, an ambition, a couple values, and a secret. And then we gave a little description so we've got something to narrate with. And we're kind of doing that for at least three of the people or at least three potential victims that the characters might seek out to to try to get this voice signed away. And we decided to be more interesting if the person whose voice it is has to give it up willingly, if it can't be stolen from them. And so the characters have got to convince them, one of them, using any means at their disposal. And so again, we're trying to give them some levers. And in this case, we came up with we wanted each one to have a dilemma, and then we still wanted them to have an objective, something they want right away, an ambition, something they want long term, a couple values that might be conflicting and given on the situation, and then a secret that the characters can discover and leverage as necessary. Um, so we have built that out for our bard. We've built that out primarily for our priest here, as well as define the priest deity to give a little more background, a little more information on them. You guys were immensely useful in that last time. It was kind of a group endeavor, and it was awesome. That was wonderful. And then we have our widow here, who we are still need a value for, a secondary value for, to build out. The other thing that I want to do with this, because we're probably not going to worry about the sailor and the mayor, 3 choices is probably enough for this kind of situation. And we've got 3 strong choices with our bard, our priest, and our widow. Is we definitely want to give them each names. We don't want to fill all this stuff out and go to play, and the characters go, "What are their name?" And we go, "Boblin the Goblin." And so we want to have some names for them. So we'll come up with those. And then we also probably want to build out a little bit of what the criteria are for it's no longer stealing, but we're going to say for collecting the voice. And then maybe talk a little bit about some of the complications and twists that we might toss into here. We've got one knocked down, but I think we might want to expand on that a little bit, and then we might want to add 1 or 2 more just in case. All right, so let's go ahead and get rocking and rolling with this. Let's pick up with our widow here. So our widow was the spouse of the widow's spouse was lost at sea, and she wants the bones brought back for proper burial. The siren can return them in exchange for her voice. However, giving up her voice means she'll never be able to tell her young children about their deceased parent, forcing her to decide whether returning the body is worth the parent disappearing from the minds of their children. And so we've got kind of a moral dilemma here, which, again, is very useful for role play scenarios. We know that the widow wants the body of her drowned spouse returned. Overall, her ambition is she wants her deceased spouse to live on in the memory of others. And so we gave her family as a value. The widow values family above all other things. We need to give her a second value. We also gave her a secret that she secretly prayed for her spouse, that her spouse would be finished with sailing forever. And then after his death, she was consumed by grief over this secret prayer. So let's try to think of another value that we can have for our widow here. Something that might potentially come into conflict with family. We don't have to get super unique about this. I'm kind of thinking love is a good one here, because or maybe soulmate kind of energy here, because might be able to leverage some of that she selfishly wants this memento of her soulmate back, of her lost spouse back, and that players might be able to get her to value that over over her family and over being able to tell her children about the deceased spouse. Sure, we can come up with some other things, but for the moment, unless there's any other ideas, I'm going to jump in with soulmate. Why did I bold that? All right. The widow believes their lost spouse was her soulmate. I guess we've already given her a gender, so we can say her lost spouse was her soulmate. Covering them is more important than, let's see here. Now, we don't want to be, being close to them is more important than anything. Cool. All right, so let's see. We got another comment here from Ben Elder. Maybe leading into the prayer secret, the widow is haunted by the ghost of her husband. A dripping wet figure lurks just out of sight, whispering, "Why? Why?" Yeah, we do something along those lines. That brings an interesting. That brings an interesting thing that we could work into this. And you don't necessarily need to work this into social encounters, but we've had some cool ideas along this line. And maybe we do this now so we don't lose some of those ideas, where we put a clue. We define a clue for each one of them to sort of something the characters can discover that would lead them to this secret. And so we don't lose that, because we had talked about having the priest having their former inquisitorial gear hidden in their house in the basement. The characters might discover. We came up with this great idea about there being a ghost that haunts the widow, and we can come up with something. With the bard, we have their enchanted lute. Maybe there's something that will lead to that, that we can lean into here. We can have the characters make it easy for the characters to discover, or make it easier for the characters to discover. So yeah, let's toss that in here as well. So let's put. We're gonna say clue. We're gonna just call it clue. Priest keeps his former, I'll just say inquisitive, yeah, we'll just say inquisitor gear. I cannot spell this to save my life. It still wants me to say inquisitive. No. Keeps his inquisitor gear locked away in the basement of his home. Cool. All right, and then let's say clue for the widow. Widow is haunted by the ghost of her drowned spouse. All right. Simple, easy. Gives us a little more depth. Then let's see here, another comment. We've got Ben Elder says maybe the party could be invited to watch the bard perform, and a perception or arcana check could reveal the special, helpful nature of their instrument. Yeah, we could do something along those lines. What I'm trying to do with this is stay away from a specific check that we need. To be more of to create some situations that's easier for the characters to kind of, or I should say, not necessarily easier, that it's that creative gameplay is going to reward. Um, and so, you know, if they decide to investigate the priest, they might break into their house and they could find that. That's cool. If they decide to, do any kind of surveillance on the widow, they're going to discover this ghost, and that's cool. And then they maybe have to go interact with these things and find out. You know, something along that lines with the bard, I think is useful. Um, that we might have. I think something I'm looking for something other than like an arcana or a perception check. I think something that's a little more fluid. Um, and I think some of that comes down to the fact that I also um, I would also kind of wonder if it's an arcana check. Why wouldn't any other spellcaster have figured this out by now? How is it a well kept secret? Um, so I'm thinking, but there should be something that we can do to uncover the magic of it. Um, hmm. Let's see. But maybe along those lines, instead of being invited to watch the bard perform, where they're going to be giving their best show, they're going to be pretending their best to be playing this enchanted lute alongside their singing and what have you. What if they have the opportunity, perhaps, uh, to see, to secretly observe the bard as he practices, or supposedly practices. And they can see that when he's alone, he doesn't bother pretending to play the lute, he lets the lute play itself. And as he kind of sings along. Um, so, yeah, maybe something along that. Because again, we're trying to reward really creative gameplay here as opposed to boiling down into mechanical roles. And there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, hey, we're going to come up with a series of checks that we could do for this, so we can make it a skill challenge and that kind of deal. I'm not saying that that's a bad way to do this. All I'm saying is that we have done that sort of thing before in different adventures here, and so we're trying to kind of highlight a new or a different way of approaching this that's less mechanic focused and more role play focused. Um, so, Ben Elder says maybe you see a poster in town. Poster shows the bard and the lute is prominent. Yeah, I think that would be definitely something to work into here to kind of set the stage as the characters are coming in. Something we might do for ourselves here, since we kind of have the time and the space, is we might define where each of these people are, where in the world they are found, because I don't think it makes sense for them to each be in the same location. What would be the odds if the Siren's like, there's three voices that are good for me, they're all in the same place? Go to that one town where people have fantastic voices and find me one of those three voices. Um, so although that would really make me laugh. You could do that. It would change the tenor of things. I don't think it would go along with this kind of dark twist that we have going here, but it could be funny if you were doing a more comedic sort of version of this to lean into. There being one town where everybody has got where just there's like a whole bunch of great performers. Um, Ben Ellis says it's the Vegas of the domain. Yeah, exactly. It's it's Songtown. It's Dollywood. All right. So let's say clue. And let's say that the bard practices. He doesn't bother playing his lute, but lets it play itself while he sings along. Yeah, okay, so discoverable clue on that for creative characters. And that gives us a good rounded out sort of set of role play elements for the bard, the priest, and the widow. They still need a name. They probably each need a description as well, just physical, so we can um, so that we aren't having to come up with that on the fly. And let's toss that down to here, and let's add description at the bottom. Just a side note on this. I like to put the descriptions for things, if I can, the narrative descriptions either at the top or the bottom of whatever the information that we're using here, because they're the thing that you're going to be like flipping through, going, "Crap, where do I find that?" While you're trying to play. And so, up to you. I just suggest you kind of put them in one place or the other to make it easy to kind of glance through and find it. Okay, so let's work on our bard then. Needs a name, needs a physical description. We could absolutely lean into sort of your generic kind of bard descriptors. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but we should give him at least something unique so he stands out as a character. What I have talked about in the past is kind of like a funny hat, which is this concept in writing where you give each character something memorable, something that's unique about them, and that kind of becomes the tag, so that anytime you bring them back up, the reader in literature, or the player in this case, goes, "Oh yeah, it was that guy. That's the guy we're talking about." Because they may get names confused, and they may get people in various locations and roles confused. But if you give them each something that's a unique feature, it's a lot easier to remember them. So, let's see here. Let's say, let's see here. He's a struggling bard, right? So, we got another comment here. We got Ben Elder says Horatio, song slinger for the bard. Younger human, dresses in extremely bright clothes that have not seen much in this domain. They've not seen much in this domain. Yeah, I like that. I would add to that, though, that those clothes are much patched and much repaired, since he's a struggling bard that we've got here, and give him a little bit of a like he's a wilting dream almost in this place. But Horatio Songslinger, let's go with that. Also, Horatio kind of fits into the nautical vibe here, if you're familiar with any of the Horatio Hornblower series stuff. All right. Let's see here. Youngish human who dresses in extremely bright garb. And I'll say colors. Colors is better. Extremely bright colors that are that stand out in this otherwise dour region. His clothes have been, let's see here, threadbare in some places and much repaired in others, as he's struggled to find consistent work. Cool. All right. All right. Terrific. And then we'll have to figure out where we want to place him. But for that, we probably need to know a little bit more about our world. So let's just put a placeholder here and let's say location. Location. Can't spell tonight. TBD. And we got another comment. See, Adam Clark. Perhaps he's a bit naive, not well traveled, doesn't have much experience, so his songs lack depth. Hasn't found his voice yet. Yeah, you can work that in there. It's worth knowing a little bit about his songs because I guarantee the party's going to listen to him at some point. So let's add that in here. Let's say he hasn't lived much of a life as of yet. Consequently, his songs lack are shallow, without depth or emotional resonance. I know I misspelled that one. Let's see here. There we go. Resonance. Yeah, that's a good descriptor. That's a good thing to work in here because, like I said, they're going to listen to this bard at some point, and he might have a beautiful singing voice, but his songs are lackluster at best. So, meaning, which is kind of cool, tying into what he wants, his objective and his ambition here, because it's something that the characters can leverage in conversation with him to kind of hype up that perhaps this is the only way he's ever going to really make a name for himself. Terrific. Like I said, we'll come up with the location in a little bit here, or probably later as we figure out a little bit more about this world and some of the other towns, because right now we just have Darkport. And while it would make sense for one of these people to be in Darkport, we should probably come up with some other locations as well. And so we'll brainstorm those in a little bit. Let's work on our priest now. And I'm just going to put the location placeholder here. Cool. All right. So our priest is a village priest. The village is currently suffering from poor fishing over the last few months. Many are on the verge of starvation. Siren can help replenish the fisheries in exchange for the priest's voice. However, giving him his voice will mean he is no longer able to spread the word of his deity, and meaning he will save some lives, but he could lose some souls in the process. We also know that he was at one point a masked inquisitor committing countless atrocities in the name of his faith. However, he's eventually repented and became a priest as penance. It's something that he's terrified his community will uncover. Let's see here. Yeah, let's see. We got a couple more comments in the chat here. We've got Adam Clark says, think Baby by Bieber as opposed to anything by Hosier. Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. There's just some songs that are going to slap you in the soul and others that you're like, all right, we might have chat GPT'd this one, did we? And, no, that's a great point. As a matter of fact, having this magically enchanted lute might be the ChatGTP version, the AI version of coming up with songs. And he's just like has these melodies, and he's like, I don't know what goes with this, so I'm just gonna sing the same sort of bland, pretty pretty ambiguous ballad for each song. I like it. Jonathan Frost says, town name ideas, Flotsam Point, Salt Haven, Sodden Hearth. Cool. Let's toss them in here. We've got placeholders for a couple of these. So let's go ahead and name some of these. We've got Darkport. One. We talked about having an underground village at one point. I think that would be cool for Salt Haven or Sodden Hearth. One of those two. Flotsam Point, I think, is a good one for our other. above ground here. And you know, the more I think about it, I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. That I think we're going to go sodden hearth for the underground, and we'll add a additional and we'll add Salt Haven as an additional location. Cool. As I completely mangle all of this, let's see here: Sodden Hearth, Flotsam Point, Salt Haven. That's what I want up here. Cool. Excellent. So yeah, we'll work on some of those, and we can assign those arbitrarily to some degree. Yeah, let's get back here, and we'll pull those out. And we'll put those in as we see fit, because we don't know much about those places. So assigning an NPC there is a good place to jump off with. Let's see here. Jumping back into our chat here, we have Ben Elder says, Brother Caiaphas Greenvale, a half elf, quite old, stooped with more than just age, carries a lantern of his order on a staff that looks to be fashioned from the shaft of a spear. Yes, monkish robes spun from ship sails, coarse and humble. Okay. And then, yeah, very flavorful names for the towns, Jonathan. Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. They are. And then Jonathan adds, could Caiaphas wear a cloak made out of fishing nets? Yeah. Could. We absolutely could do that. So let's say Brother Caiaphas Greenvale. Yeah, the green veil kind of works with his deity, the Gray Lady, here as well. And yeah, so it's a half elf of considerable age, stooped with more, stooped under the weight of more than his years. He wears simple robes made of salt-stained sailcloth and a cloak woven from myriad fishing nets. Should it be a cloak or should it be a shawl? Think about that. I only mention it because a shawl would make him seem more of a grandfatherly sort of figure, and it might be a little, kind of juxtapose that against his bloody past. I think we're gonna go with a shawl on that. Cloaks are ever present. Jonathan says shawl or capelet. Adam says vestments maybe. Yeah. Ben says bowed under the weight of his past actions. Yeah, that's kind of what we're going for here. Stooped under the weight of more than just his years. So let's see, shawl, and he carries the lantern of his order atop the broken shaft of a spear. Should it be a spear or a harpoon? Keeping with the nautical theme. Then again, spear kind of adds more to the inquisitorial. Let's keep it spear for now. Oh, harpoon? Jonathan says harpoon? Okay. Okay. Yeah, we'll go harpoon. We'll go harpoon. It's a little more nautical. It's just as savage. Adam says, I was literally thinking the same thing. Harpoon is more flavorful. Jonathan says trident. And Ben was thinking spear maybe because of the military inquisition. Yeah, yeah. And your binds are all in the right place here. We'll have to think about that. All right, we'll come back to it. For now, we'll say harpoon or spear. We'll put that down there. Yeah, and because there's value to both of those. Harpoon is more nautical and kind of flavorful for the theme. And a little grim there as well. And the spear is more in line to kind of a clue of his past, which could have some value. So we'll have to think about that. We've got Jonathan Ross saying his trident is 2 on the nose and heroic. I think harpoon is kind of grim. Yeah, agree with you there. Spear would speak more of his past, daily reminders, penitence, that kind of thing, says Adam Clark. Yeah. I think we need to go with the spear. As much as I want to do the harpoon, I think we need to go with the spear on that. Because you're right, it's in line with the penitence, it's aligned with his past, it's a good clue for the characters if they're really paying attention. So it lays a little bit of track there. There might be more to him. As flavorful as the harpoon is, there's also the mechanics of it. Just harpoons have a heftier shaft to them. Would be hauling that around all the time. They're fairly substantial, so maybe the spear would be easier to kind of walk with and hang the lantern from. Yeah, I guess we're gonna go with the spear. All right. So that was easy enough. Now let's work on our. One more comment here. It says, "Yeah, that's Jonathan Frost says, yeah, that's a tough one. Good arguments, guys. Yeah, completely agree with you there. Sometimes it's hard to make a decision, and there's good reasons to go either way. And the good news about that is you can't go wrong. Let's hear. Yeah, so you can't go wrong. There's good options for everything. And then Adam Clark says, if that's the case, I would have other holy people in the order carry their lanterns on harpoons to show the contrast. Yes, we could do a couple of things on that. Then we could say that other people in his in the order carry their lanterns on harpoons or on fishing rods or other very nautical sort of things. Old yard arms, that kind of deal. But nobody uses a spear shaft. Yeah, so I think that's a good point of clarity in here. He carries the lantern of his order atop the broken shaft of a spear, in contrast to other members of his order who use more nautical implements. Harpoon, fishing rods, fishing rod, old yard arm, etc. Cool. So we don't have to create a bunch of characters for that. Cool thing about noting that is kind of a detail on here is the contrast is that since the characters are exploring around here, the they may have seen other members of this order, other members of that follow the Gray Lady, who are notable by their suspended lanterns on their staffs. And maybe there's a quick history check to see if they notice anything odd about that. Again, we're trying to stay a little bit away from some of the mechanics in this particular adventure and looking more towards the social encounter sort of stuff that's a little looser. But there's nothing wrong with kind of keeping in mind the sorts of checks that you are going to ask your characters to make, because inevitably they're going to want to roll dice, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so being prepared to do that is a great call. Ben Elder says, picturing confrontation with the party, I swore I was done with this, as he pulls the spearhead out and reattaching it. May the lady forgive me. Yes, yeah, absolutely, 100%. We've already kind of figured out that he's a grizzly boy, and he very well might become violent at some point. Which reminds me, we need to give these guys stat blocks too at some point, in case things go to combat or they need to make dice rolls too. So, all right. So that's, I think, good stuff for our priest here. Pretty filled out. Let's head over to our widow. In the meantime, Ben Elder says, love the contrast idea from Adam Clark to emphasize the clue. Yeah, I do too. That's really good work, gang. Really good work. All right, so let's see here for our widow. And I'm hesitating on what we're going to call her because Ben keeps coming up with great name ideas. And I kind of want to side eye over there and be like, "All right, Ben, what's the name of our widow?" Um, but so let's work on our widow here as we go through. We've got a human. We've got a half elf. So I want to stay away from those species potentially. We could. I'm kind of feeling tiefling for the widow. Something about a distraught tiefling just kind of standing in the window looking out at the ocean, sort of I don't know, just it feels right for this. Not your standard like red skin tiefling, but kind of a bluish skin, sort of almost almost kind of akin to the environment here, the grays and the blues and the greens of the environment. Um, Jonathan Frost says Delilah. Okay, yeah, yeah. Leave a last name too, but Delilah I think is a good first name. Delilah. And we're going to say, until we get some other ideas, we're going to say tiefling, woman of middle age. Ben says Natasha Saltshire, tiefling, middle age, worn, repaired clothes. Yeah, I think. Why don't we make it Delilah Saltshire? And definitely, as you say, Ben here maybe looks very haggard and tired, grief-stricken. Absolutely, I think 100% she should. That's, yeah, we're gonna say middle age. Her skin is sky blue, but her face is lined with grief. Let's see, with a grief that digs deep into her skin. Her skin is sky blue, but her face is lined with grief. It's just deep into her flesh. I've used skin twice in that sentence. We're gonna say flesh. Right, and her clothes are black for mourning. Much patched as she refuses to wear anything else until her beloved is returned to her. Let's see here. Yeah, so Ben Elder says, backing up here a little bit, says maybe looks very haggard and tired, grief-stricken, like we said, or guilt-stricken. Yeah, that could be an insight check if we want our, if as our player is asked to make that sort of stuff. Adam Clark says, I like to lean on the tiefling value names, so something like Ruth. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I will frequently use tiefling value names as well when I'm doing this. The only... I won't say the only reason that I kind of like the Delilah Saltshire and kind of staying away from that in this is that the value names are sometimes a little too on the nose. They tell you a little too much about the character right out the gate when they introduce themselves, which is not a bad thing for a lot of characters. It's, again, a funny hat sort of deal. But since this particular encounter has a lot to do with uncovering their values and their beliefs and their secrets and that sort of thing, we don't want to make the widow necessarily any more transparent than anybody else, I'd say. Although we could always give her a value name as the middle name. Let's think about that for a minute. Jonathan Frost says, does she wear a veil all the time now? I think she does. I think she's the type to wear a veil. Let's see here. Her skin is sky blue, but her face is lined with a grief that digs deep into her flesh. A webbed, let's see here, a veil of webbed lace hides her face, but does little to conceal her melancholy. Cool. All right. Perfect. Well, if she's Delilah Saltshire, I kind of feel like she's got to be in Salthaven. Does anybody object to that? I mean, I kind of know it's a little on the nose. I know it's a little direct. Kind of feel like it has to happen. Salthaven. So we'll put her there for the time being. The Bard. For whatever reason, I feel like maybe Horatio should be in Sod and Hearth. I don't know why I feel like he's underground. Of the three, he's the only one that doesn't have like a direct attachment to the sea. And so it kind of makes sense, I think, for him to be in that underground environ, that underground village. And we definitely want to give our characters a reason to go there. And we'll give them other reasons to go there too, but this could be a good one. So we'll put him in Sod and Hearth. And then our priest, I guess, goes into Flotsam Point. That makes that simple. Or Flotsam Point. Oh, yeah, we definitely can't put the widow in Flotsam Point. That would be, considering how her spouse died, that would be too yeah, that'd be a little too grim. Okay. So Ben says maybe she has scratches and bruises in her arms or small parts of smashed crockery in her home. The one picture of her with her beloved had her eyes scratched out. Maybe pure perception check. Um, and yeah, those are good details. Those are very good details, Ben. Um, hmm. I think they would need. Yeah, let's put the scratches and bruises on her arm. The details about her home, I think, would be more subtle. Like, there's smashed crockery, but it's been swept up, right? There's, there's that, uh, there's a picture of, there's a portrait of her with her beloved, and the eyes have been scratched up, but it's been taken down. Um, because she'd be trying to keep up. In my mind, she'd be trying to keep up the masquerade of uh, of being, yes, grief stricken, but keeping it together. That she hasn't completely descended into this insanity, and so she'd be kind of trying to keep that information from the neighbors, as it were. Um, and so that could be stuff that is found in the house if the characters slink in there to check it out, which they very well may do if they realize that she's being haunted. So let's add those details in here and let's put them in an appropriate place. So say though her dress is long sleeved. Actually, we'll say the long sleeves of her dress hide scratches, bruises that cover her arms from where she has done herself harm while overtaken by her grief and guilt. One thing to put in here, by the way, if you are going to do that, if you're going to do this in a campaign, is you're going to want to make sure that you put a trigger warning on here. You're going to make sure your players are okay with self-harm existing in this world. In horror campaigns, there's a lot of things you need to make sure that they're okay with because they can be very triggering to a lot of players. And there's nothing wrong with that. We can, this is an easy detail to remove if we need to. But double check into that because you don't want a player who's perhaps unknown to you has had a history of self-harm and due to grief or what have you, or other sorts of conditions, and gets kind of triggered and upset by this particular encounter. It's the kind of thing that could really derail a campaign very quickly and make a player have a really bad time. But if everybody's cool with it, it's a really deep, it's a really deep detail and makes this place seem very real. So just something to handle carefully if you're going to do it. Let's hear. Let's see here. The widow is haunted by the ghost of her drowned spouse, and we're going to say inside her home, she's taking steps to appear functional. She's swept up, smashed crockery from her fits of grief. She's taken down the portrait of her and her beloved, where she scratched out her own eyes in her guilt. Okay, cool. Let's see here. Ben says, thanks, in reference to the, or it says, thanks, maybe that could be a clue to the possible haunting. And then, yeah, that's very true in terms of our comment about being careful when you work self harm into adventures, and that he was aiming it more to be signs of haunting, poltergeist kind of thing. Yeah, I could see it being that. The only thing I could see her being haunted by a poltergeist in terms of, her upset, spouse. But if they're kind of soulmate characters here, I don't think that he would jump to the conclusion, even in death, that, um, that that she's responsible for his demise because of this prayer. I think there would be more sadness at the loss, more confusion over why she would say this prayer, because that prayer really has, she never said she wanted him to die, just that she wanted him to be finished with sailing forever. And now, the phrasing of that has got her twisted up in grief. Um, but I think that if they really had the loving relationship that they have, that he's not going to, or I guess we've really kind of tried to keep her spouse gender neutral, which is fine. That they're going to not jump to this immediate hatred of the widow, and maybe the haunting is more benign than that. Maybe it's about being reunited with uh, you know with their soulmate. Maybe it's about secretly trying to console the widow in her grief. Um, and it could be, we could go a lot of ways in that. It doesn't have to be a vicious haunting. In fact, if it is a vicious haunting, if we go with it in terms of a dangerous poltergeist, um, the characters are probably going to want to intercede and uh, get rid of um, and sort of banish this haunting here, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It could be something else they do as a service to convince the widow to give up her voice. It could give them another lever. So I don't think there's any wrong answers here. I think it's whether you want to lean into the tragedy of love lost, or whether you want to lean into the grief of wishing for something and then regretting it. Um, and both are strong horror themes. We can go either way with that. Again, no wrong answers. Um, Ben was saying, that's true. Maybe they don't realize that they're dead and is lashing out because they can't understand what's happening. Yeah, absolutely. You could go in that direction as well. Again, these are all, strong ideas. So, when in doubt, pick one that seems the coolest to you and run with it. You can always change it later if you need to, or, your point is there's no bad options when you're doing something like this. Um, that you can lean into it either way. And we can leave it open so that we can lean into it depending on kind of how our players interpret it, right? Because they're gonna, when they find out about the situation, they're gonna lay their own ideas about what's happening kind of over this, and you can easily flex into whatever it is that they're kind of assuming, or you can make it the opposite so that they have that twist and that reveal later on. Just whatever works for your campaign when you're running it. And sometimes you might leave it open because if you run this multiple times for different people, you'll have different impressions and different interpretations, and you might want to give yourself that flexibility in there so that so you can go either way. Cool. All right. Well, we got a lot done. Perhaps not quite as far as I was hoping we would get, but quite a bit that we've managed to knock out in this hour, which is fantastic. So next time we're going to dig into the complication and twists that could occur as the characters work their way through here. Um, and yeah, and so wonderful. I'm really excited for what we've kind of shaped out here, and I hope that kind of the process for this is becoming a little clearer for everybody. I know that it's not as structured as like Five Room Dungeon or the Five Scene Dungeon or any of those sorts of methodologies, but this is still a way that you can build out some of these encounters and lean on the characters specifically, as opposed to some of the more organizational elements. Um, One last comment here. We've got Ben Elder says a lot of good options. Yeah, my group would definitely make it their mission to save the widow, probably for free. Yeah, I have got plenty of groups who would do that too. Where like they would be like, we're gonna drop everything, we're gonna save the widow, we're gonna take care of this poor woman, and we're certainly not taking her voice. Like it would become a whole thing. They might adopt her. I've run campaigns where they have. I ran a Lost Mine of Phandelver adventure at one point where the characters saved the wood carver's, the woodworker's wife, and she became a reoccurring character. They like check back in on her every single time they're in Phandalin and like bring her money and gifts and like it's this whole thing where they're like she's like been adopted into their family. Um, so yeah, parties will do that. You can give yourself the flexibility to roll with that or push against that as you see fit. All right. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. If you enjoyed this live stream or if you've enjoyed this recording, please like it, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment. All that kind of stuff helps the channel grow, helps more people find us, and keeps these chats very dynamic as they have been tonight. And if you ever want to jump into one of my tables or play a game with me, you can go to startplaying.games/GM/RJ Kerr and find all of my posted tables there that I've opened spaces, or request a table of your own. I'm open to running custom adventures for folks, running custom campaigns or custom one shots, all that kind of stuff. Just click the button in there for the request button and send me your thoughts. I'm happy to work with you. Thanks again, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all at our regular time on Wednesday. All right. Thanks, everybody, and I will talk to you then. Bye now.